Hello and welcome to today's video, and today's video is in the style of my friend Jules Burt, who is partially responsible for this because we're going to look at my vintage Puffin SF and fantasy and my Puffin collection generally, all of which is vintage, but I will be showing you some contemporary editions as well because recently I've acquired some books from Jules and I'll be augmenting, upgrading and increasing the size of my collection. Onwards. So at the moment, this little really useful box contains my small but perfectly formed vintage Puffins collection. Most of these are science fiction and fantasy, so there's going to be a focus on them. But really, I wanted to get more, and I'm really enjoying the Puffins from the late 60s, early 70s. They're a very beautiful livery, and they're in the A format, of course, which is the format I love. And recently, my good friend Jules Burt, he acquired an awful lot of penguins. If you watch his channel, you'll be seeing him doing some epic penguin book hauls of enormous sizes. And he's a huge penguin collector, so do check out his channel, subscribe and what have you, if you don't already. I'm sure you probably do, because he's one of the best YouTubers around and the most dedicated book collector I know. And I'm delighted to have had him as a friend for the last 12 or 13 years now. We've had many adventures together. So recently he sent me this box of Puffins. Let's have a look. There we go. And it's quite small, but there's a lot in it. So I'll show you what I've got. I'm also going to be bagging my new acquisitions and seeing if I can get them all in the box, so I might pull the SF out and put it in with the main A format collection, but we'll just see. I'm kind of cheating in a way because there's one book in here which isn't a Puffin, and that's this, which is Stag Boy by William Rayner, which is a Fontana Lions. Let me just show you that. And I do like Lions. It's a defunct children's imprint, a classy cover that, and that's kind of a sort of Robert Holdstock type thing in a way, sort of a folk horror thing. It's very sophisticated, very good indeed, and but I'm keeping it in there because it does fit with the rest of the theme of the Puffin collection. Now I do have this little bit of bubble wrap in here to stop these books falling over, so that will be able to come out because I've got new acquisitions going in, as I say. Now first of all, I want to show you something I didn't get from Jules, and that's this, the Puffin Science Fiction Galaxy. Let me just pan down a moment, as they say. Excuse the noise. There we are. And it seems to be in a shaft of light as well. Good grief. It's from another sun, from another star. Are we capturing that? Maybe not. And as you see, this is a slipcase set, and I recently got this from eBay, and this was, I think, 20 quid, which is pretty good because there are 4 books in it, so they cost about £5 a piece anyway. And let's just take a look at it. And this dates from the early 70s. There's the characteristic Puffin colophon logo there, and it tells you on the spine which books are included, and it's in pretty good nick, and the books inside are fairly good as well. So we'll just take a look at that. Isn't that nice? Lovely. It is quite hard to get decent slipcases second hand these days. They're usually quite tight, so I had to sort of stop filming them just to sort of get them exposed. And we'll just have a look at what's in this little set. And yeah, I wish they'd go back to these. I mean, you get the odd one, but the slipcases now are very thin usually, and they're B format books. So we've got Harry Harrison, Spaceship Medic, and that's quite a nice jacket on that. I like that sort of green and orange motif. I guess that's the most typical SF novel cover you'll see in this video. And of course there is another Harry Harrison children's SF novel. I think it's actually a couple of short stories and novellas rather in Puffin, and that's The Men from Pig and Robot, and I haven't picked that up, and I guess I will one day. These are all pretty good in terms of condition, really nice. And this one, look at the colour. I mean, that looks unfaded, it looks unread. It's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, none of these books are particularly rare. You do see them around. Somebody who is quite interesting is Nicholas Fisk. He was a children's SF and maybe horror writer as well. This is space hostages, and again, nice and slim and good condition. Just going to look at the date this is from. He wrote quite a few for Puffin, but he wrote for other publishers as well. Let's see, this was first published by Hamish Hamilton in '67. Funnily enough, Puffin acquired, not Puffin, Penguin, who of course Puffin's an imprint of Penguin, acquired Hamish Hamilton years and years ago, and they became part of the current Penguin group. And this is a '78 reprint. And this had been reprinted 4 or 5 times in the '70s, so it was obviously popular. So he was kind of like the UK children's go-to guy for SF. Somebody who did a lot of juvenile books across a long career was Andre Norton, who of course is a female author. This is Cat's Eye, and those of you who've watched the channel for a while will remember I had a bit of a period where I was collecting science fiction novels with cats on the cover, and it got a bit out of hand, so I got rid of some. But I've wanted this one for some time, and as a writer she's not one of my favourites, but as a juvenile writer she's really, really good. So obviously it's interesting because here you're seeing a black sticker on this 60p. So this was where Penguin put the price up, because these stickers are non-removable, and publishers used to do that a fair whack in the 70s and early 80s. I need to remove some of the marks from this, but I'm very pleased with that, because normally you see it and it's in a bit of a state. Again, not a rare book, but hard to find in good condition. There's some small amount of wear there, but I can clean that up a bit, and that's lovely. Been after that for a while. And to complete the slipcase, there's Arthur C. Clarke's Islands in the Sky. Now, I already have a copy of this. I need to compare the two to look at grading, and we'll sort of go from there. But this one had quite a few printings over the years, but very, very nice indeed, I think you'll agree. So I'll just have a look at the two side by side and see what I'm going to do, because one of them will probably get moved on. So my existing copy is already bagged, and it looks pretty good. Let's just have a look at the spine. Yeah, I think I'm probably going to stick with that one. There's a tiny bit of a ding down there in the corner, nothing too bad. But looking at this one is, yeah, there's quite a bad crease across. I mean, it's not really bad, but it's noticeable. And look at that, it was a school price for somebody. Let's see. Williamsburg School, 1978-79. The C.A. Anderson Memorial Watch and John Fitzpatrick Prize to Bruce Hanna. Right, okay, I wonder where that school was. Williamsburg sounds like the US to me, but the names look Scots and British. So there you go. So I think that one's going to go. Now, as I say, I've bagged this, so it does sort of bring on the issue of, can I fit it into the slipcase in the bag? And probably not is the answer. So we'll just have a little look at that, and that's definitely not going to happen. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put that aside, and I will pop the other copy back in for now, and I'll do it off camera, so it's quite tight, but I think you'd agree that's rather nice, isn't it? I mean, with these slip cases, they were really common in the 70s. I remember them myself and bought them at the time, and I've got a few. I've got an oldest one, I've got a few Moorcock ones. The one everybody wants, of course, is the David Pelham Ballard one, which is like, you know, the books themselves are expensive. It's got the slipcase as well, which has different art to any of the books. It's quite something. So yeah, but I was very pleased with that. So I've pulled out that little bit of bubble wrap, so this is a bit tighter because it was getting on my nerves really, and we'll just go through and see what's what. So this is a combination book haul sort of bagging session and having a look at the collection generally. I think at this point what I'm going to do is show you the things which Jules sent to me. There he is in Penguin Classics mode. What a fine man he is. And you know, he sent me all this stuff, he's so kind, and a really nice bookmark for the collection with the oil pan logo on. Look at that, isn't that great? In fact, 2 of them, gosh, embarrassment of riches. And he does these great postcards as well to promote his channel. Look at that. Marvelous. Weird shadow over YouTube. That's me and Jules, and he got this rather new wave surrealist science fiction one as well, which is fantastic stuff. Well done, old man, well done. Right, onwards. So we're going to have a look now at the stuff which I acquired from him. Let me just pull these forward and we'll work our way through them. So this will be a mixed bag, but we'll have a look in detail at the SF and fantasy a bit later on. So what happened, Jules, he did this this sort of video going through all his Puffin storybooks, and sort of checking whether he was going to get rid of some. And he had about 250, so it was an enormously long video. It is up on the channel. He let me have this pile, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14 books. One of them he gave to me because he was going to give it to me anyway. 13 books, and put it this way, I didn't pay £2 for any of them. They're really nice and cheap, and he does things at really good prices. Obviously, if it's a really rare collectible book, you pay a bit more, but it's all good, so it's worth watching his channel. So this I thought was charming. This is Ajax the Warrior by Mary Elwyn Patchett, which is a book from the 1950s, though this is a 70s reprint. And as you can see, there's a dog on the cover with a koala and a snake which creeps around. And the main problem with these books, if anything, is that they've got some spine fade, but I can live with that because they're mostly unbroken spines. And this is obviously an Australian book. It's an autobiography from a young girl. Mary Elwyn Patchett would have been that young girl in the 50s, and about her dog Ajax, who saved her life on at least 2 occasions in the outback. I do like dog stories, and I thought that was absolutely charming. So that was a must-have, Ajax the Warrior. And it wasn't a book I knew. A really famous book in South Africa that you never hear about is a book called Jock of the Bushveld. If you're watching from South Africa, you probably know that one. That's not one I have, and I wish I had. It was in Penguin Modern Classics very briefly. Now, this is a reasonably famous children's book, and it is kind of an SF novel. This is Penelope Farmer with a very long and distinguished career, and this is Charlotte Sometimes. Now, I bought a copy of Charlotte Sometimes new, probably about 1.5 years ago, and I've not read it yet. And it's currently in Vintage, and here it is, Vintage the imprint, of course. And it's a time travel story, and I really, really like this format that Vintage do. Is smaller than a B. It's an unusual little format, and it is a classic children's time travel story, and I thought that was lovely. So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to use the new one as my reading copy, and I'll be keeping the Puffin as pristine as I can. I'm just going to flip it over. It's got some minor wear at the extremities, but I just love this style of illustration. There you go. And Charlotte, she's sort of at boarding school, I think, and then she wakes up and she feels that she's somebody else, and she realizes she's traveled back in time 40 years. So it's quite an interesting one. Looking forward to reading that. Then this is the absolute peach. This is the one that Jules was sending to me. This is Heartsease by Peter Dickinson, which is the second volume in the Changes trilogy. The Changes trilogy came out in the late 60s. They're children's SF novels. Though are they SF? They're very, very hard to categorise, but I do urge you to read them. They're absolutely amazing. And he's a really interesting writer. He wrote a lot of children's books. He wrote one adult SF novel called The Green Gene, which was published by Daw in the USA, and in the UK by, well, it was a Panther in the paperback. And that's kind of a social comedy about genetics in which everybody who's Celtic turns green, their skin turns green. And he wrote a little diptych of crime novels, which are actually alternative histories. And the first one of those is called King and Joker. But the Changes trilogy, it's really hard to describe. It's set in a near future where people have turned against machines for some unknown reason. And they become very superstitious. They smash machines up, and everything sort of goes back and becomes quite primitive again. And across 3 volumes, you see 3 different pairs of children, a boy and a girl each time, dealing with different situations that arise out of the changes. Now, this was filmed as a BBC TV series, which I watched back in the day, and I really enjoyed. And it was slightly different because they picked one of the characters from the book and focused on her and made her their connecting character throughout. So this is the second book, and I haven't read it since the 80s. And what I remember of it, a lot of it is set on board a canal barge, and it's in Britain, and there is an American spy character in it, and this spy gets stoned as a witch by the sort of people in Britain who've succumbed to the changes, because it only seems to have happened in Britain. And that's an interesting thing, because there is something particularly British and archaic that has caused the changes. I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's absolutely amazing, brilliant. I'm not even going to mention how it fits into a broad ballpark, but it's really, really good. And this was the second one to be published. And it's also the second one in terms of internal chronology. And I'll come back to that later, because it's an unusual thing where the first book that was published in the series is the climax. The second book is the second book. And the third book to be published is like the beginning of the story. So it's a really interesting thing. So he had these ideas, obviously, this idea to write this one book and then to go back and do these two prequels. Usually when they've been in omnibuses, they're arranged in order of internal chronology. I was really pleased with that because it's beautiful. And it does have a faded spine. I'm going to show you the other ones in the same livery because I wanted to get them in the same livery. So here are all three in the same livery from the same period, same cover designs. And we're looking here from left to right, as you read from left to right, in terms of the publication order. So the Weathermonger was the first one published, then Heartsease, and then The Devil's Children. But in terms of internal chronology, if you want to sort of get the great climax of the Weathermonger, which is amazing, right at the end as a real sucker punch, you read them in this order: The Devil's Children, Heartsease, and The Weathermonger. And that's the order in which they were filmed for the TV series. The TV series hasn't really stood the test of time that well. It's quite plodding. It does have great electronic music by Paddy Kingsland, though, which is really, really excellent. And here's the rear artwork, and it's just absolutely beautiful. I mean, the font that they use is beautiful. The typeface is beautiful. There's something just modern about it, and in a way there's something hauntological about it, because it does remind me a lot of Britain in the 70s. And, you know, coming across books like this, fantastic stuff. And these were reissued around about the time of the Changes TV series, because it's mentioned on the back of this one and that one. Really great stuff. So that's good news. I've now got a complete set of those, and I'm looking for a complete set of the hard covers. Not the first, but there are 1984 reprints, and one of them I've had since the 80s. The other one I got recently, and I cannot find the 84 reprint of Heartsease for love nor money. It's proving to be very difficult to get. I have shown those in the club room, and you know, that is something which I'm really trying to get, and it's just impossible to find them at the moment. Interestingly, the first edition can be found, but it's actually the reprint I want, so I've got them in a common livery. Next, looking at Susan Cooper, and neither of these came in the haul, but it does relate to something that is in the haul, which I'll show you in a moment. And you're seeing two different copies here of Oversea Under Stone by Susan Cooper. This is my sort of current contemporary edition, and this is a sort of vintage one from, this is late 70s, early 80s. I remember it really well with this cover. I never got around to buying them with these covers. Used to see them in Bodley Head, hardcovers, same jackets. They were loads of them in Hay on Wye for years and years and years, never got around to them, and now they're like hen's teeth. And I really like this, and this is the first volume in the Darkest Rising sequence. And I actually prefer it to the rest of the sequence. There's 5 books in all. But I was talking the other day to Fleur Hitchcock, the children's writer, who is a friend of mine, children's novelist, and she's trying to write a crime novel at the moment, so hopefully that'll come together for her. And she was telling me that actually Oversea Under Stone, which is a kind of prelude to the Darkest Rising sequence, was written afterwards, which I wasn't so sure about. But I'm going to check that now, actually. So let's just see. Let's have a look at the publication date. So it's kind of a retcon in a way. Let's have a look. 1965, and just out of shot here I've got a copy of one of the other volumes, so I'm just going to check that because I'm not so sure. But looking at the date, she may well be right. So let's see. I'm not sure about that. So yeah, we'll pop something in the titles and check that. But I really enjoyed this. This is classic sort of children go on holiday in Cornwall type story in the summertime, and they discover they've got, you know, a charming older relative in a big house, mysterious attic with an odd map in it, and there's some people who appear to be normal but they're actually quite dangerous and strange and evil. It's great stuff. I really loved it, and the whole sequence is really good. But this is my favorite one, it has to be said. So I am looking for them in this livery from this period because those are my favorites. I've got a complete set of the current livery, and I used to have an omnibus, which is my reading copy, but it is these old Puffin ones I really cleave to. And if I could get the Bodley Head ones in good nick, that would really be quite something. I'm hoping one day somebody will put a set of them up on eBay or something, but you're probably looking at quite a bit of money actually, sadly. Again, to show you contrasting jackets here, this is the copy of Greenwich which I've just got from Jules. Thanks for that, Jules. That's another cracker, and I wanted it with that livery very much to fit in with my early copy of Oversea Understone. This is the existing copy that I had. I bought this a while ago, and I do like that, but I don't like it as much as this. But looking at it, I'm very tempted to hang on to it because it's really, really nice as well. So it adapts the art on this one. It is quite interesting because the art is the same but different. This is into different segments and feels more Celtic and magical, whereas that does have its charm. And this is the current one, and again it's in an interesting format, this format that Puffin and Vintage use. So the Vintage ones are slightly smaller, the Puffin ones are taller. I mean, they're nice, but it's just not the same. It just doesn't have the charm. Maybe, you know, in years to come it'll acquire a period patina of its own, but I don't imagine I'll be around to enjoy that, so it is what it is. But these are great books, pick them up. Children's fantasy novels of the highest order, really, really well written. So moving onwards, this is somebody I really like, Rosemary Sutcliffe, fantastic children's, how can I describe it, historical fiction writer really, Mark of the Horse Lord. Absolutely fantastic. I read her Arthurian novels last year and they were just brilliant, and this is highly acclaimed novel of intrigue and ambition on the outer edges of the Roman Empire. And you know, a lot of these people from this sort of period, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, proper classical scholars, they'd done the reading, they knew their stuff, and they didn't write down to children, you know, they wrote up, you know, they really did. This does have some wear down there and there, but you know, it does have an unbroken spine. I can live with that. It's absolutely lovely. So I really enjoy her work, and at some point I'm going to binge read a load of them because they are so good. Then came an utter delight, The Dodo, the Auk and the Oryx, Vanished and Vanishing Creatures by Robert Silverberg. Yes, that Robert Silverberg, the science fiction writer, the great science fiction writer, one of the finest ever. In the 60s, Robert wrote loads and loads of non-fiction books for adults and children, encompassing history, exploration, biography, natural history, and this one is one that ended up as a Puffin. It was published by somebody different in the States, of course. He also did a book called Mammoths, Mastodon and Man, which I have seen in Puffin, but never in good enough nick. As you can see, this is absolutely lovely, and as a child this was the sort of thing I read all the time. There's a little bit of bowing to the spine, a tiny amount, but we can live with it. I'd never seen it before, and when I saw that Jules was letting it go, it was fantastic. And of course, sadly, the Great Auk and the Dodo are both long gone. The Oryx was very threatened but has been a conservation success story, so the book is slightly out of date by some decades. But it's great to always look back and read the stories of animals like the Auk and the Dodo as a warning to what we could lose because we've lost them forever. There's a really wonderful story by, let's see, Jessie Greengrass, I think is her name, who did a short story collection which has Great Auk in the title, and I can't recall the exact title, but I did a event with her in a bookshop some years ago. It would be about 8 years ago, and two other writers, and she just won an award, and it was her first book, and she was very, very shy, and she was doing a reading, and the other two writers were far more acclaimed and further on in their career. And the story is about the killing of the last Great Auk, and I said to her, please read it because it's fantastic, you know, people really relate to it. And she read it and it blew the crowd away, and we sold every single copy of her book. The other two writers who are more famous, they didn't get a look in, so it just goes to show, you know, it was a really fantastic story. Jessie Greengrass is in her first collection which has Great Auk in the title. Can't think what the exact title is, but I'll try and put it on the screen. But yeah, I was really pleased with that, so I am looking out for more of Bob's work if it's non-fiction. A lot of it's in print, but it's print on demand, but I would like to get more of it because he's just such a well-read and interesting guy, and I'm sure this will be a cracker to read. It'll take me back to my childhood when I used to read things like this all the time. The Silverberg, of course, is a great associational one for the collection as well. This is a book I've shown before. This is The Old Powder Line by Richard Parker. I don't know a lot about Richard Parker, but I read this about a year ago, and I already had a copy, and this is my existing copy, and I got this one from Jules. I bagged this, but it is in quite a state. It's very bent and bowed and what have you, and the spine is about to go. This is a nicer copy, so I'm going to keep this one and pass this one on. And this was a time travel story, an SF novel about trains and railways, and I really enjoyed it. It had a real old school charm. I think it dates from the 60s, the old powder line. Fantastic stuff. Also from Jules, I got this, The Longhorn Trail, which, as you can see, is a Western by Kenneth Olliott, who I can't say I'd ever heard of. A nice chunky tome. It does have a faded spine. Beautiful text block, absolutely lovely. This is a sequel to an earlier book called North Against the Sioux, continuing the adventures of Portuguese John Phillips. Based on actual historical events, is full of convincing detail about the building of the Union Pacific Railroad, the extinction of the buffalo. Well, they didn't quite become extinct, the bison, but they were pretty much got close, cattle drives and all those things. So it's a good sort of social Western, and I'm looking forward to reading that. You know, these are sort of books that nobody writes or publishes for kids anymore. Everything's got to be sort of like in your face and like a video game. Nothing has any weight to it. And, you know, I know I'm sounding like an old boy here, but, you know, I really think we do need to go back to traditional virtues of good storytelling. And I'm sure that book's going to deliver it in spades. Then when Jules posted his video, I saw this come up, and straight away I could see it was an SF novel. This is No Man's Land by Simon Watson, and as you can see, it appears to have like a giant robot attacking a castle with people in the foreground, and they seem to be brandishing or wearing suits with the letter G on the back of them. And I thought this looked fantastic, and it says a brilliantly convincing novel of the future. There you go. And if you look at those radio antenna dishes and people starting in suits, that rather reminds me of Christopher Priest's The Run, his first story, which I really love. And I just thought this looks really good, a dystopian SF book for kids. So I was all over that. So I'll let you know, and I need to research Simon Watson, so I don't know anything about him at all. Another Peter Dickinson, and one that you never see without a ding down in this corner. They've always got a ding in that corner. Is Emma Tupper's Diary. This is about a little girl who goes on holiday during the school holidays, and she has to sort of write a diary to win a prize, and she doesn't think it's going to be very exciting. She ends up going to visit a loch, probably in Scotland, I imagine, and yeah, that looks like a plesiosaur, doesn't it? So shades of Nessie, and she thinks it's going to be boring, but her cousins, I think, are there, or friends. Is it cousins or friends? I'm not certain. Let's see. Her cousins, who have been experimenting with the death trap of a dilapidated old submarine. So obviously they discover something antediluvian. So that's obviously a kid's SF novel. I get a feeling I read this when I was small, because when I've seen it before, it really rang a bell with me. And I'm not sure if I'm thinking of something else, but I got a feeling I read this a long time ago when I was very young, because it's niggling on the end of my consciousness. So when I read it, I'll find out. And I like Dickinson's work, as I say, so I'm quite keen to see if it rings any bells. And I imagine that if I did read it, there's suddenly going to be an explosion of nostalgia in my consciousness. And now a really famous children's book, An Alternative History by Joan Aiken. I think there are 8 in this series altogether, and I can never think what the series is called, but this is The Wolves of Willoughby Chase. And here's the contemporary edition in Vintage Classics, never out of print. Joan Aiken wrote books for adults, novels, this historical sort of things, romances, and she wrote loads of books for kids, and really popular. Considered by some to be a bit conservative, but like this is really famous. And there's a sequel to it called Black Hearts in Battersea, which I think is one of the best book titles ever, and I don't have a copy of that and I've never read it. I have reread this, but I want to reread it. I'll just pop it open a minute, and it begins, instead of with an info dump, it does have an info dump. And you know, the thing with Puffins like this is they've got these nice illustrations in it as well. Look at that. And the whole idea of this was published in 1962, and it has a little note. The action of this book takes place in a period of English history that never happened, shortly after the accession to the throne of good King James III in 1832. At this time, the Channel Tunnel from Dover to Calais having been recently completed, a great many wolves, driven by severe winters, had migrated through the tunnel from Europe and Russia to the British Isles. So there you go, what a great idea. So you've got a different king who never ascended on the throne, you've got an early steampunk Channel Tunnel, and you've got wolves coming in. Absolutely fantastic. So that gives it a really, really interesting background, and I'm looking forward to rereading again because it's been a long time, and I do want to pick up a copy of Black Hearts in Battersea with the same livery as this if I can. Stunning stuff. So it just goes to show, you know, that the really good children's writers, they would really experiment with things, and the Aiken and the Dickinson are really good examples of that. Finally, for the whole part of the video, I had to get this for the video widow because she likes horses, looks after 2 horses. They pop up occasionally on the channel, Dobsy and Hemi, and they're quite funny and irreverent animals. And I saw that and I just had to get it for her. It's a really nice book, nice chunky tome, and lovely. Look at that, really pictorial. It's not slathered in text like books are today. It kind of speaks for itself. And this is actually amazing because it's an anthology. And when you look inside, I was just astonished at the writers who are in this. It's fiction and non-fiction. I'm just going to read out some of the names. Virgil, Lord Byron, Anna Sewell, the author of Black Beauty, of course. Monica Dickens, that's Charles Dickens' daughter or granddaughter. Barbara Woodhouse, the dog trainer. Hilaire Belloc, Siegfried Sassoon. And there's more to come. K.M. Peyton, George Borrow, H.E. Bates, John Betjeman, Xenophon, Lewis Carroll. It goes on and on and on. George Masefield, George Hewitt Evans, a great rural writer. More Sassoon, Dickens, Gogol, Roger Lancelin Green, Tolkien, Sutcliffe, Kipling, Saki. It's just incredible. There's all this amazing stuff in here. Ted Hughes, Arthur Conan Doyle. So brilliant. So I'll be reading that as well. And I would recommend a German book called Farewell to the Horse. Again, the name escapes me, an author, German author. It was a bestseller in Germany a few years ago. Begins with an R, his name. Farewell to the Horse. You can look it up on something like Amazon or Waterstones.com. It come up. Amazing book about how the horse affected human history and how in the last 100 years or so the horse is fading away. And it really does make you think about I mean, I've never been particularly a horsey person myself, but it's an incredible book. It does make you realise how we've used animals and how they were part of our technology and an integral part for such a long time. So that's for the video widow. Okay, just to skim through the rest here. Greyfriars Bobby, I got this a while ago. Really nice dog story. It's a true story of a little dog who sat by his master's grave for about 14 years after his master died. It's a true story, and you can visit the grave, which I think is in Edinburgh, and it's really quite something. And I have to say, for a children's book, it's really challenging, and I think a lot of young people today would really struggle with it. And I was really impressed with literary quality. Absolutely beautiful copy. I did have a little cloth-bound hardcover, which was a Waterstones exclusive, but I sold that on because I prefer this. Absolutely lovely. I think you'll agree. Then moving on to an SF writer, John Christopher. This is The Sword of the Spirits. John Christopher wrote a lot for children. Obviously, we all know the Tripods trilogy, which was filmed by the BBC. And this one, I believe, is an historical novel, or is it? Because that looks like a gun down there. I've not actually read this. Let's see. Yeah, I think this is a kind of Keith Roberts type thing. Or Richard Cowper. So that's going to be interesting because he's clearly got a gun there. But it's got Stonehenge on the back, so I think this is a kind of degraded Britain thing, so I need to have a read of that. But I got that from Morris at Zardos a couple of years back, haven't read it yet. This is a lovely one as well. This is a Christopher, this is a dystopian story as well. This is a slightly later book. This, I would say, is round about 1980. They kept this livery sort of at that point. I'll check on the date. It's bagged, as you can see, so I'm not going to pop it out. And this is a kid on the run. And it does say on the back, after the tragic death of his father. It's about political murder, so it's dystopian. Chilling story of life in the not too distant future, when power is held by a few and rebellion crushed mercilessly. And he won the Guardian Award for Children's Literature. So there you go. That'll be an interesting one. Again, dystopia. You saw my other copy of Islands in the Sky earlier on. And there's another Clark which was in Puffin. I think these are the only two Clarks that were in Puffin. This is of Time and Stars. It's got a bit of a ding there, unfortunately. I got that from Bear Island Books in Cardiff some time ago, and I do have a nice hardcover of it. And this is basically a collection of short stories, but really, really nice jacket. I think you'll agree. Absolutely beautiful. Look at that. Hardly any blurb on it. Includes the Sentinel, of course, which we know is the basis of 2001, and a great cover by Peter Jones, who did so many great SF covers. I mean, they just don't make them like this anymore, do they, at all? Then Susan Cooper, you saw that one. I've got another Susan Cooper, which I remember this coming out, Seaward, an absolutely stunning, beautiful jacket. Look at the quality of that artwork. Nobody does stuff like this anymore, you know, it's just all done on computers and what have you. That's a beautiful painting. I'm not sure who the artist is. Haven't read this one. I think this is an historical story, or possibly some elements of fantasy. And the cover is by Steve Braun, who I can't say I know. But I remember that coming out in the 80s and stocking it and selling it. Lovely, lovely book. Then Roger Lancelin Green, Tale of Troy. I do like these classical people who had the proper education. And just look at that. It's obviously like a Greek figure vase. Beautiful. And of course, the story of Troy is seminal to Western culture and one of the great stories. And, you know, Roger Lancelin Green, absolutely fantastic stuff. Really, really quite something. Still in print, still going. And then I guess I should show, I've shown these before, I know, but we'll pop them up again because they're so beautiful. If I can find all three stands, I don't think I can. Where's my third stand? Here it is, hold on. And we're talking about Lagan, of course, or Lagin. I say Lagan because I'm Welsh. She, of course, herself said it's Le Guin, like Welsh for Gwyn, but it's not spelt like a Welsh Gwyn, but, you know, we let her get away with that. I'm sure she's right about her own name. Let's pull these together. And I know Jules acquired some of these himself recently. Just going to get them more into the frame. And I think these are the nicest paperback editions there ever were. You know, they're just beautiful and I love these books. I am due to reread them actually because it's been a very, very long time. I sell them all the time in my job. I always say to people when they pick up the omnibus, which also has Tehanu, the fourth book in it, which is more of a sort of teen or young adult book than a children's book. I always say these are the best written fantasy novels in terms of sword and sorcery you'll read, and these are their greatest jackets. Absolutely stunning. They're really hard to find in this condition. I think I got them from Dorset Bob, or I may have picked them up individually, but you'll come across them, but you won't see them in this nick. You know, they really are quite something. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Now, earlier on, of course, I was waxing lyrical about Rosemary Sutcliffe. This is her most famous book, The Eagle of the Ninth, which was filmed a while ago. Is it just called The Eagle or The Ninth or something? I've seen a bit of it on the TV, but this is her most famous book, and it's about a Roman legion who lose their standard while fighting the Britons, and they have to find it. It's an honour thing, and a really beautiful 70s edition there. Frontier Wolf, as you can see, is also a Roman story. And my favourite retelling for children of Beowulf is her version, which is called Dragon Slayer, the story of Beowulf. Now, I have an older edition of it here somewhere, and I can't for the life of me find it. I think it's in a box with a lot of my fantasy novels, which is just called Beowulf. And it's a really, really good retelling. I remember selling this 80s edition a lot when I was younger, and my friend Jane bought me that for Christmas, which is just really nice. So my Sutcliffe library is building. Somebody else I'm very keen on is Henry Treece, who wrote a lot of historical novels for children. Here are three of them: Man with the Sword, Viking's Dawn, and Legions of the Eagle. So you've got a Roman one, you've got a Viking one, and this one is round about the time of the Norman conquest of Herod the Wake, I think. Again, classical scholar, school teacher. He was the mentor of Ted Lewis, the greatest British crime novelist who ever lived, the guy who wrote Get Carter. And these are really quite something. And the video widow's really into them. She's got a few as well. And she's been reading them, and she is a big sort of history buff and has been saying how authentic they are. So that I think you'll agree they're really, really beautiful stuff. So we're trying to get more trees. Some of them are very collectible, hard to get. They're hard to get in good condition. And the hard covers, secondhand, which have elements of sort of folkiness, folk horror, what have you, they are really, really hard to find in good condition. And this is the last book in my collection of Puffins, and this is Tarka the Otter by Henry Williamson, which of course is an absolute classic animal story and very, very beautiful artwork. Lovely. I think you'll agree that's fantastic. And you know, these books, you know, obviously there's loads of copies out there. Again, the faded spine is common, but we have to learn to live with that, and maybe we can upgrade one day. But that's absolutely gorgeous. And of course he wrote one about a salmon as well, which I haven't read. Lovely stuff. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bag some things, I'm going to de-dupe them and represent my collection. Okay, so they didn't quite fit in one box, so what I'll probably do is, as you can see, I've bagged some of them now. They're all bagged up. The Silverberg will probably go in my SF Associational box. The Longhorn Trail, I think I will tuck down the side. And let's see, Stag Boy is still in here, so I have to think about something for that. But as you can see, I've bagged them all now, and they look rather nice. And as I say, I've got to get rid of one copy of this one. And do I have any other dupes in here? The Green Witch, I think I was thinking of dropping, but it's very, very nice. In fact, I've taken it out, haven't I? Yeah, I've done that. So I've now got a little really useful box full of Puffins. Am I going to carry on, or am I going to stop? Who can say? Thanks for watching. I'll put some links to Jules's video, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.